Welcome to the Holy Land and this biblical site of Bethel. We're filming from a hillside overlooking the modern city of Bethel, but right here is where Bethel existed. And this is an interesting place. It's a phenomenal place. There's only one city or town that's mentioned more in the Bible than Bethel, and that's Jerusalem. So Bethel is mentioned in over 60 verses in the Bible, representing over 30 distinct stories and prophecies, all of them in the Old Testament. Only the location of Jerusalem is mentioned more, as we said, than Bethel. And of course, we can't cover them all in this overview, but we're just going to look at some of the highlights of some of the things that took place here in Bethel. So we're about 15 or so miles from Jerusalem. In fact, we're on this hillside and I can see Jerusalem back over that way. We'll pan around here in a bit and show you that. So we're going to talk about some of the amazing things that happened here in Bethel. So it was near Bethel Abraham built one of his first altars mentioned in the Bible, and there he invoked the name of the Lord. It says in Genesis 12:8. From there he moved to the hill country on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. One of the first places was in Shechem, about 25 miles north of this place right here. After Abraham had fled to Egypt to escape a famine in the Holy Land, he returned to the same place near Bethel and once again invoked the name of the Lord. That takes place in Genesis 13:1-4. It says, Now Abraham was very rich in livestock, in silver and in gold, and he journeyed on from the Negev as far as Bethel to the place where his tent had been at the beginning. So he returned back to the same place between Bethel and Ai, to the place where he had made an altar at first, and there Abraham called upon the name of the Lord. Now we should mention that Bethel, its meaning is house of God. It comes from two words, one Bet or Beth, which means house of. So whenever you see Beth in Hebrew, that's house of. And El comes from Elohim, a shortened version, so it's house of Elohim, Beth El, house of Elohim. So that's its meaning. When Jacob was fleeing from the wrath of his brother Esau, he stopped for the night at Bethel. This is where he had his first encounter with God in a dream, and then there was a stairway that he saw going up to heaven. So there's many churches today that are named Bethel or whatever, because this is where there was a stairway that went up that Jacob saw in his vision where he went up. And he called upon the Lord here and committed his way to the Lord. It says in Genesis 28:10, it says, Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran, and he came to a certain place and stayed the night there, because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down, and he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad from the west to the east, and the north to the south, and your offspring shall inhabit all of the earth. And then Jacob set up an altar and worshipped the Lord there right here in Bethel. In Genesis 35:1, it says, After Jacob's return to the Holy Land, Bethel was the second place where he and his family settled. There he set up an altar to God, and God spoke to him. So he also settled. Jacob was a while in Shechem, then he came down here, understanding that the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, they were all nomads. So they were nomadic people. They had sheep, livestock. They just roamed. So they weren't always in one place for a long time. But he was here at this place for a while. Upon first entering the Holy Land, after conquering Jericho, Joshua and the Israelites next conquered Ai and Bethel. So that was Bethel was the third town that they conquered when coming into the Promised Land. And Bethel was one of the first places in the Holy Land where the Ark of the Covenant of God was set up, and where the priest offered sacrifices and inquired of God. In Judges 20:26 it says, Then all the people of Israel, the whole army, went up and came to Bethel and wept. They sat there before the Lord and fasted that day until evening, and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And the people of Israel inquired of the Lord, for the Ark of the Covenant of God was there in those days. So the Ark of the Covenant was here for a while. And then in 1 Kings 12:25 it says, When the northern kingdom of Israel was divided and separated from the southern tribes of Judah and Benjamin, Jeroboam set up one of his golden calves here in Bethel. He set up one up in Bethel, and he set up one in Dan, because he didn't want the people from here in his northern kingdom to go to Jerusalem and possibly defect. So he was trying to protect himself. So he set up a golden altar here to a calf, and one in Dan, and he said, these are the gods that led you out of Israel. And Jeroboam committed a great sin in that, and all of the kings after him who followed him, Scripture says, and they followed the evil ways of Jeroboam. So that was here. In 2 Kings 17:24, after Assyria had conquered and exiled the northern kingdom of Israel because of their disobedience, the king of Assyria sent one of the captured Israelite priests back to Bethel to teach the people from the other nations who had resettled in Israel how to worship the God of the land, who was Yahweh, the true and living God. However, they continued to worship other false gods as well. Because Bethel had become so corrupted by the worship of idols and other gods, several of the prophets railed against it. Some of those were Jeremiah, Hosea, and Amos. They prophesied against Bethel and used it as an example. So there's a lot of rich things that happened right here in Bethel. And if we put all of these things together, all of these key stories together, here's the picture that emerges. Bethel served the ancient Hebrews as the early point of communication with God and of the entry into the Holy Land. It was the key place where they first settled. As the religious, cultural, and political life of Israel increasingly focused on Jerusalem, Bethel faded in significance. So from here, the focus shifted to Jerusalem. However, when the kingdom of Israel was divided shortly after Solomon's reign, the northern kingdom of Israel departed from the southern kingdom, and Jeroboam established Bethel as one of the two major centers of idol worship in the northern kingdom, the other being Dan, as we mentioned. And this corruption sealed its fate in the Bible narrative. And by the time of Jesus' birth, Bethel had completely faded away as a place of importance, and it's not mentioned anywhere in the New Testament as all. So once again, you'll see God's judgment here as well. So what can we observe from this important place, Bethel, that we see here? Well, in some regards, it was the place of two different responses to God that were witnessed. It is a place where Abraham and Jacob had special encounters with God and worshiped Him here, and it was also a place where Jeroboam set up this golden calf. It was an idol worship place, and the Ark of the Covenant dwelled here for some time, but it later fell into worship of false gods, and it's nowhere mentioned in the Old Testament, and God had His hand of destruction and punishment upon it. So here we are in Bethel, means house of God, from Beth Elohim, El, Bethel, and you can see some of the terraced hillsides. They used to farm all of these hillsides, but now it's no longer an agrarian culture anymore. So anyway, rich things took place here in Bethel, just about 15 or so miles north of Jerusalem. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching, and God bless.